Center website. And on top of that, the Wellness Center is also arranging several workshops and meetings where, please encourage your friends also to attend this kind of events. So this may not be immediately of relevance to anybody, I mean, in that respect, but this kind of information is always useful. And please encourage all your friends to attend this kind of events when it is arranged, because this is going to be useful at some point. And not only for you, if you want to help some of your friends also, the awareness that is created during these workshops will be quite useful. So in that respect, I request all of you to visit the Wellness Center website. And also please be reminded, I just want to remind you that we have an emergency hotline. This information is available in the form of posters in all the departments and also at the Wellness Center website, where if anybody would like to get an expert opinion urgently, then please contact this emergency hotline. This is 24/7 active, and there will be a trained counselor on the other side who will be answering your call. And also, please make use of the Your Dost platform, which we have organized at the Wellness Center. The Your Dost platform also will allow you to get help for the well-being. And please utilize all these options, and hopefully from next week onwards we will have 2 psychiatric social workers in the campus. With that, over to you, back to you, Nishant.
Okay, thank you, sir, for the introduction about the Wellness Center. I've also shared the link for the Wellness Center in the chat. People who are interested can look it up. So we'll begin the session with our 2 panelists, Dr. Ajit Bhide and Dr. Ghorpade. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yes, sir. Shall we begin the questions? Yeah.
Right.
Yes, sir. So I'll begin with the first question. This is for Dr. Ajit Bhide. The question is, I'm a young adult and I have a high suspicion that I may be on the autism spectrum. Is a formal diagnosis worth it or too cumbersome and burdened by stigma to pursue?
This is a very interesting question because the autism spectrum is indeed there. And the characteristic of an autism spectrum is a poor ability to socialize. But very few people who have a disorder of the autism spectrum realize that they have a disorder on the spectrum because they are content with the way they are. They do not themselves feel inadequate in any way. It's the others who realize that these people don't socialize too well. There are other disorders which have some features in common with the autism spectrum disorder. A classic example is something called a schizoid personality disorder, where the person is usually given to good intellectual pursuits but does not like socializing. And he feels very awkward when he's forced to socialize. Now, there have been a couple of autobiographical writings that suggest that these authors are indeed on the autism spectrum disorder. With the autism spectrum disorder, a diagnosis can be made better by a professional than by an individual on his own. So now everything is do it yourself. So the criteria for the disorder are available online. And if you feel you meet the criteria, then you could make a decent guess that you probably fit in with this disorder. Okay. People who have classical autism, which is one extreme of that spectrum, find it very difficult to readjust to adjust to various aspects of life. They have a great need for repetition of certain behaviors. They cannot adjust to any change in their routines, and they commonly end up as socially awkward individuals. Not only is a socializing poor, but there's also an awkwardness about it. I think many people many professionals have trained in dealing with autism spectrum disorders, and it's best you take help from them.
Okay, thank you, sir. We'll move to the next question. This is for Dr. Ghorpade. Sir, can you please unmute your microphone, Dr. Ghorpade? Am I audible, sir? Dr. Ghorpade, can you please unmute your microphone? Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. The next question is to you, sir.
Tell me.
Why do sometimes I feel that I'm worthless, while other times I feel like a laureate? Why do I bite my nails? Why can't I focus on a task? And why do I feel insecure?
See, the description that this person has given indicates that he is highly nervous and anxious by nature. So when he is in this kind of a situation, like a competitive field, definitely the anxiety is going to increase a lot. And when
Okay.
that happens, this mood changes takes place. Probably he needs a talk, I think.
Okay.
With clarification, his anxiety may come down.
Okay. Yes, sir. So do you suggest that this person should consult somebody for the anxiety issues, for biting nails and
True.
etc.?
So, yeah, that's why what I felt, most of the questions that have been asked to me, I
Yes,
think
sir.
needs a kind of a interaction. This is
Okay.
not just one question, yes or no. You cannot do like that.
Okay.
Probably they can send an email to me. I can answer them in much detail. Probably a chat also may be worthwhile.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir. Doctor, all the contact details are available in the wellness website. You can reach them through it. So the next question is to Dr. Pide. Sometimes I can't refrain myself from wasting time, even when I know about it. This circle does not end. Is there a way out?
Yes, there is a way out. What you're really looking at is poor time management. And when you are wasting time knowing about it, that clearly indicates that you're not doing enough about it. And good time management is the secret to solving a lot of problems in life. It's like a public secret that a lot of mental health issues arise, especially of the minor variety, not the severe mental illnesses such as schizophrenia or severe bipolar disorder. Those are not related to time management. But a lot of what we call minor mental illnesses, the old name used to be neurosis, are related to not doing enough on time. Now, I think you need you need attention to your time management and simple strategies like a to-do list and ticking off items on the to-do list. Every evening, make a list of stuff you need to cover tomorrow and have another major list which you are going to address over the week. For example, paying certain bills or corresponding maybe for your academic work, which does not have to be done very, very urgently. So every week you have a list and every day you have a list which may overlap with the weekly list. Every day, tick off the items you are supposed to complete. Now, everybody doesn't need to function with a to-do list, but it's a very good strategy for those who have poor time management. Another thing is introspective journaling, which is a strategy for anybody. Keep track of how your life is going. Keep a diary every day about what you managed to achieve and what are the things you yet need to work on. This kind of introspective journaling helps smoothen out the process of your life much better than you would manage without it if you have time management issues. Now, time management is really a subject on which people have done their thesis and so forth. So you cannot cover all of it. But if you realize that you're a poor time manager and still find it difficult to get to grips with it, try these strategies. Also, I'd recommend a book to you by Stephen Covey, who was something of a management guru, who emerged about 35 years ago with a book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of the important habits that they deal with is time management. Good, effective people are good time managers. Read this book called First Things First, which really gets you on the track of getting your priorities right and managing your time much better.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I have one of the participants who has raised their hands. We'll take an audience question.
Sure.
Hello, you can, Sanyogita, you can ask your question. You can unmute yourself and ask the question. Hello, are you able to unmute yourself?
It seems mic has been disabled.
Mic
Can
has
you
been
enable
disabled.
his-
I have a small suggestion. People
Yes,
who
sir.
have questions from the audience,
Yeah.
you have a huge list of questions, and I
Yes,
must
sir.
apologize that I need to leave early by 5 o'clock or 5:10 at the most, because 5:15 I'll have to leave for my next program. So let us try and cover the questions over here. If there are sub questions coming from the audience, let them put them in the chat line, and if possible, we'll cover them. Otherwise, we'll take them up through the Wellness Center website.
Okay, sir. Yeah. Okay, attendees, like you can put them in the chat, or I've shared a Google form link. So use the link for filling the questions. We will try to reach to you at a later point. So let's move to the next question. This is to Dr. Ghorpade. I feel stressed out and less sharper than when I joined IISc. I used to be a very interactive student, but I feel very dull now. My mind feels cluttered and I can't focus. I feel I am constantly under stress and can't feel happy. I feel stress in my shoulders throughout the day. So,
see, again, this description indicates that he is having difficulty in adjusting to this new environment, competitive environment. I feel what he requires is relaxation exercises may be the best alternative, or a minor dose of tranquilizer may be worthwhile. But more than the medicine, probably a meditation yoga may be worthwhile for him, I think.
Okay. Okay, sir. Okay, thank you for the answer. We'll move to the next question then. How to convince a person for therapy? I have tried educating the person about therapy. Any other intervention suggestions would be helpful.
No, I think this is a very common situation. Those of us in the mental health profession, psychologists and more particularly psychiatrists, face this almost every working day. There are people who need help and those who will not take help in spite of it being very evident that they need help. Sometimes there's a lack of insight. Sometimes they don't realize that they need help. And the word of a respected colleague, peer, sometimes a respected elder, doesn't have to be a parent, it could be a well-wisher uncle, or it could be even your professor or a faculty member who's close to you, may be able to guide you to the right kind of therapy. But lots of people, in fact, we feel a majority of people who need help do not get to the point where they will take the help. And that is very, very unfortunate, but there it is. Now, it is nice to have stories of people who have benefited from therapy, and those people are the best ambassadors for therapy, in the sense they can convey to this person that I was helped by therapy. Why don't you also try it? I'm wondering whether empaths, because your title itself comes from the fact that you have empathy for others, and it's wonderful. I think as a self-help strategy, not a self-help strategy, but a strategy of peers who have got together to help people. I think you should reach out to such people who are refusing to take therapy, and do not, they say the path to hell is paved with good intentions. So sometimes when people gang up, the perception is that you've ganged up against an individual, though you have not actually ganged up. So one or two people alone should help this person realize that he needs therapy. But I must say, this is not, there is no definite method of getting a person who needs help to be able to take help.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you for the answer. Then the next question is to Dr. Ghorpade. I feel I have been underappreciated for my work's qualities, and I feel really bad when I see people who don't deserve getting appreciation. It makes me feel angry and demotivated. How do I deal with this feeling?
Yeah, this statement indicates that this person has got a problem in his judgment about himself. He seems to be judging more than that is required for himself. Probably he should remember that a mirror does not tell a lie. So when the mirror what he reflects can be accepted, same way what others will assess him should be accepted. That would be the best solution for him, I think.
Okay, sir. There are a few questions that came in later today and which seem to be important. So I'm trying to fit them in. This is a question to both the panelists. My dad is suffering from Parkinson's disease. I'm feeling guilty for leaving the job to pursue higher studies, as I think I'm a liability for them. And what if something bad happens and I'm not there with them? But I'm also passionate towards my research. What should I do?
Now, I think Dr. Ghorpade, okay if I start?
Yeah, please.
So Parkinson's is a serious and chronic kind of condition. So please make sure that whatever happens, you reach a good neurologist to help your father with finding the optimum treatment for his condition. Most cases of Parkinson's do not completely recover. We have to face up to this ugly truth. And most commonly, overwhelmingly, I should say, it's a treatment that is lifelong. It is not a treatment, as of now, our knowledge is such that the treatment has to go on lifelong. In severe cases now, certain types of surgical procedures are recommended, and they do seem to do good to about 80% of people who go in for surgery. But it's not to convey the impression that everybody needs surgery. Now, it's when you're faced with this dilemma of your own career, your own progress, and also having to cater to your family's need for you to be there to help them out. This is a personal challenge that you have to sort out. Nobody else can do it for you. But I would advise any young person, do not sacrifice your career entirely, because you are there mainly, this is not a selfish statement, you are there mainly to see that you do well in life. And by doing well in life, you may be able to help your family much better in the long run. Do not lose track of this fact. If you're far away from the place where your parents reside, then make sure that you find a network with others over there in your native place or hometown who can make sure that your father has regular treatment and regular follow-up. If this is possible, that'd be wonderful. And then periodically you can check up on what's happening. Visit the neurologist when you go to your hometown to make sure that your father is following up the treatment well and is able to, some of the medications are quite expensive. So work that out as well. Do not get laden with guilt. Easy to say, tough to do, but not impossible to do. If you work at it, you can find strategies to cope with the situation. Many of us go through this, that you have responsibilities to the family, but do not neglect the responsibilities to yourself. If you're out singing, dancing, drinking, and making merry, engaging in gambling, and neglecting your family, now that is a pretty pathetic scene. But if you're actually attending to your career, carrying on with your research, writing your thesis, then I don't think it's something wrong you are doing, and that must get priority to a great extent.
Okay. Dr. Ghorpade, do you want to add something?
Nothing. Everything has been added there adequately.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your answer. So the next question is again to Dr. Ajit Pide only. I have a constant headache. I never truly feel happy. It's always one thing or the other that stresses my mind.
All right. First of all, where is your headache located? Is it all over the head? Is it one part of the head? Typically, we have something called migraine, which affects some part of the head. Very, very rarely does it start with a generalized headache all over the head. Classically, it used to be described as one half of the head, but that is not commonly the case. It is a case in a significant minority of people, either the left side or the right side, sometimes alternating between the left and the right. And chronic headache of this nature is usually a throbbing kind of headache. You know, when you run, you feel your heart palpitating, you feel your heart beating faster. Now, that kind of throbbing also can occur in the head. And if it's occurring in the head, in a certain part of the head, it is very likely this is a vascular headache. And the most typical vascular or blood flow related headache is a migraine. Migraine can be brought on by stress. But if you say you have constantly some kind of headache, the chances are you have possibly a migraine and possibly a complicated migraine with something called tension headache. Now, tension headache is a very common type of headache which usually accompanies stressful situations in life, such as overworking, finding that you are under stress because of financial reasons or relationship problems. If that is the case, then you need the attention of a professional, a neurologist and or a psychiatrist. Ideal to go across to a psychiatrist because psychiatrists have a much broader spectrum that they cover. If it is entirely psychological, the psychiatrist will be able to help you even better. But if it's a complicated thing, then the psychiatrist may try to help you by himself or herself and also take the help of a neurologist to address this problem. You are constantly unhappy in addition. Now that is something you have to watch out for. And this may need self-assessment. It may need assessment by a professional who will then help you understand why are you never truly feeling happy. There are a number of habits that contribute to chronic unhappiness, but if we have the time, we'll take them up. One common reason is that you always look at the negative side of life and see nothing right with life. If you have that kind of a pessimistic outlook, that can shape into a chronic depression, which can be complicated by attention headache as well. And this needs attention through psychological therapy as well as medication.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you for the answer. So the next question is for Dr. Ghorpade. It feels like being unhappy is normal to me. Whenever there are moments when something goes good, I feel like something like this should not have happened, as things will turn out bad again after a few days. So I always worry about the upcoming bad days. I feel I deserve this misery. Why does this happen?
Yeah, this description is rightly describes what kind of personality this person can be put into. I would say he is a pessimistic person. Probably that is the basic nature right there from a long time. On the top of it, there seems to be a very mild degree of depression and bit of anxiety. I think he needs the professional help. Both psychological therapy and medication therapy may be worth trying for this individual.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you. The next question is for Dr. Pide. While taking critical career decisions, I'm putting myself in too much pressure. It is getting difficult to list priorities, feeling a lot of fear of missing out, that if I choose one option like safe and secure path, which will give me good family time and peace, I will miss the opportunity to excel and getting good respect, or vice versa. In those situations, I am going into a loop of thoughts where I just keep thinking and feel depressed that I am unable to make decisions and nothing is giving me happiness. Could you please guide me how to handle such situations?
I wonder if you've heard of Harvansh Rai Bachchan. He's a Hindi poet. And for those of you who follow Hindi, this couplet, this sort of verse from his poem has helped me a lot in my life. And I agree with you that prioritizing is very nice to talk about. It's very difficult to actually implement when you have two appealing dilemmas. So Harvansh Rai Bachchan in his poem says, "Ye bura hai ya ki acha, व्यर्थ दिन न इस पर बिताना, जब असंभव छोड़िए पथ, दूसरे पर पग बढ़ाना." So he says that you have to choose a path. You can't possibly have both the paths. So choose one, be prepared to sacrifice the other. And that sacrifice sometimes is very telling on our minds and we feel, oh gosh, did I do the right thing? Did I do the right thing? Don't get bugged about this. If the first path does not work out, there are too many stumbling blocks and you keep falling, then come back and try to go to the original path. Now, this is not always possible, and then you pay a price. And that is a price you should be willing to pay because life comes with a lot of these dilemmas. There is no guaranteed method that you can avert it. But what's happening is, while negotiating, shall I take this or shall I take that and shall I take this and shall I take that? I've seen a lot of individuals in my clinical practice and also some of my experiences socially, that people have allowed both the options to go away because they did not choose even one at the right time, getting caught in this dilemma. They did not take either one of the paths which could have been, which could have accrued, some achievement could have accrued from any one of those. So please don't be a victim of this inaction on account of indecision. Okay. Now, there is a part of the question, I will miss the opportunity to excel and getting good respect or vice versa. And getting good respect or vice versa, I think the vice versa part of it. In those situations, I'm going into a loop. That is exactly where you could reach a point of fatal indecision, and that must be averted at all costs. The other thing is, it's not a bad idea to have close confidants, one or two close friends, maybe the person closest to you in your life, sit and discuss with them, because sometimes they can give a feedback on what your abilities are better than you can judge yourself. Don't hesitate to take help is a basic step in life that I would advise people to take.
Okay. Thank you for the answer, sir. But I think the person who has asked the question has also put in the chat, but is that not the same as giving up? Like giving up on choosing one? Like I guess
you know that you
they're
can't
asking
take,
a
but if you could take both, you wouldn't be asking the questions. For example,
Yeah.
can I take tuitions while I'm doing my PhD? A number of your students do take tutorials for undergraduate students elsewhere. I'm aware of that, and it's not a bad thing. At one time, at least, the campus used to encourage that. Now, if you've chosen something that's going to aid you financially and also help you revise some of your basics, it's a good option to take, rather than say that no, I don't have enough time for my thesis. Now, if you again, time management, as I mentioned, it's a public secret among mental health professionals that people don't manage their time properly because they get immobilized by these dilemmas. So yes, there is a sacrifice involved, no doubt about it, but you clearly cannot have both options, otherwise you wouldn't be asking this question.
Okay, sir. Yeah, thank you for your response. The next question is to Dr. Ghorpade. I always feel a sense of underachievement because of which I never feel happiness even after a great accomplishment or success. I always try to overanalyze myself, of which I always live due to which I always live in a constant fearful state of mind. How to get rid of these feelings?
Yeah. This is a really a practical problem for many people. When they are, say, 5.5 feet tall, and by extending their arm up, they may extend by another 2 inches or something. And if they want to touch the roof, how can they touch the roof? It's impossible. That's why they have to learn to be contented. That is the fundamental requirement here. Contented with whatever they can achieve and be happy. The next step may be more contentment. I think that is the attitude that he has to develop, I feel so.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you for your answer. The next question is for Dr. Bide. After recovering from COVID, I am not consistent with my work. Very often, even after a small failure in getting some results in my research, I find myself quitting everything. I feel that I'm incapable of doing anything which creates a fear and disrupts everything. I just get consumed by all the negativity. I then develop headaches due to these innumerable negative thoughts. My appetite and sleep cycles are already disturbed. I try taking some days off to bring me back on track, but then during the break, I'm afraid that I'm wasting time and would lag if I don't start my work ASAP. I get lost then, and I don't know what else to do. How do I overcome this?
Right. I am presuming this person had moderate to severe degree of symptoms when he had COVID. I'm not clear about how severe the COVID was. And moderate to severe degree of COVID has been associated with a degree of anxiety and depression in the aftermath of the disease. This is quite well known. It doesn't happen to everybody, mind you. Even with the most severe case of depression, COVID, there may not be psychological sequelae, but the chances of psychological sequelae like this, like anxiety and depression, are more when the illness is severe. That's the point I need to make. So if you find that even a small failure in getting some results makes you feel like quit everything, clearly you're getting caught in a negativistic frame of mind. You've mentioned clearly that there's a lot of negativity in your life. I just consumed by all the negativity. That's a very graphic statement. Headaches are, as I mentioned, psychogenic headaches, headaches because of psychological reasons, also called tension headaches, and that accompanies depression fairly commonly. You've mentioned that your sleep and appetite cycles are also disturbed, which is again a common accompaniment, very, very common accompaniment of a depressive illness. And I am getting the impression from listening to this story that this person needs psychiatric intervention, most likely will need some medication along with some supportive therapy and some re-educative therapy, a change in lifestyle, a change in attitudes, which could be brought about by a good psychological therapy. For this reason, do not delay. Please get in touch with a mental health professional, ideally a psychiatrist, or see a psychologist. Psychologists are usually people who quick to pick up where medication may be necessary, and they will refer you to a psychiatrist for the medical part of it, the medication part of it, and they themselves will help you cope with the psychological distress that you are facing.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Before moving on, I would like to clarify one thing. One of the students had sent a query regarding the stipends, that they were not receiving stipends, and some queries regarding whether they can leave the course in between, master's course in between. I request the student to contact the academic section, because it's not the query is mainly related to stipend and academics. So I would request them to contact the academic section. Next question is to Dr. Ghorpade.
There is some degree of distress that does happen when you don't receive your stipend. That's true. But I mean, yes, you're absolutely right that this is an administrative matter rather than mental health professionals being able to help you to get your resources back in order.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Okay. The next question is to Dr. Ghorpade. I'm a PhD first year student who has just joined. Although I have cracked the interview, but I'm not sure, is it really my calling? Doing BSc and MSc was one thing, but a 5-year commitment, that too with no further future security, is bothering me. Please guide me.
Yeah, this indicates that probably he was not properly counseled, or he has not really did the homework before joining the PhD. That's one aspect of it. Second one, he may be a great person in a small institution and he would have cracked the MSc, etc. very well. But in such a big institute, everybody is a genius. So he has to compete with a genius person. There he is finding it difficult. Probably he has to introspect now the pros and cons, and then he has to take a decision. Probably that is the best solution that I can think of for him.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir. Another question from which I received after sending you the list. One of them seems important. One second. I joined IISc after completing masters from IIT Bombay in 2014. They joined in 2020. This gap of 6 years is giving me a lot of pressure and mental stress. Plus, I'm a working mother of a 2-year-old girl. The stress is overwhelming and I feel tired, but I don't want to lose. I aimed for IISc and got the admission, but now I feel I'm not fit for this academic pressure. How do I handle this without causing harm to my family? PS, my family is highly supportive. I know it's all in my thoughts.
You want me to take that?
Yes, sir. Yeah, like any one of you can answer.
First of all, I think working mothers are a marvel of modern times. I often think of the goddesses that are displayed with 8 hands who have to do so many tasks. Multitasking is a huge demand on working mothers, and hats off to you for having taken up this challenge. Now, having come this far, please, my very empirical statement is do not give it up just because you are facing a lot of stresses, and you have the advantage which many other women don't, that your family is quite supportive. So share out the domestic responsibilities with your spouse or other relatives who may be available to you. I don't know who you mean by your family. Perhaps it's your parents, perhaps it's your parents-in-law, perhaps it's your siblings or your spouse's siblings. Do not hesitate to take help. Be aware of the fact that they have given you help if they agree to give you help, and you can repay it later, and you can repay it through life in small measures. So don't get overwhelmed by this. This phenomenon of good family support is something which is, I think, much more here in our country than it is elsewhere. So you are at an advantage right now. Supposing you do complete your PhD and go for a postdoc, by that time your child will have grown up, or if you have more than one child, they would both have grown up, and that will be a look at the positive side. Look, you decided, you studied in a respectable institution, you've got into another respectable institution after a break, which is quite remarkable. And I know the number of people in IISc who have come with that kind of a background after a period of a break where they were not in academia. When you come back to academia and you see bright young minds, and you see that you are you're something of an auntie over there because the others are much younger, you feel a little pushed back, Don't allow that to happen to you. Unfortunately, in this country, we have too much stigma attached to age. Don't get stigmatized by the fact that you're older than your peers in your PhD program. You've chosen this, stick to it. A PhD is necessarily quite respectable across academic fields. And also, when you look out for jobs, if you have a good PhD and you can back up in your interview, you can answer more questions than a person who does not have a doctorate, because a doctorate spells that you are quite a authority in one niche area of a particular academic field. So don't get discouraged completely. Don't get discouraged by the pace and the quickness with which perhaps your peers are facing the tasks that are put at the same time before them. And when you are in a group, befriend them as though you are of the same age. Don't start playing the old woman in that group, because as a mother of a 2-year-old, you couldn't be actually very old. So please look at life a little more positively and take the help of your family, as I mentioned. If you feel that still this is not enough, then reach out to a professional who will help you get your self-esteem back on track.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you for that answer. The next question is also to Dr. Bide. Why am I not able to complete the given work on time? I begin to feel like I don't have the capacity to do it. I should quit from that work, something like this. So how to avoid these thoughts?
That question is not in your list again, is it?
No, this is in the list that I sent you, question number 13.
Okay, why am I not able to complete the given work on time? We spoke a little while ago about time management.
About time management, yeah. So
I
this is a simple.
Very often adjectives confuse us.
Yeah.
The management gurus, way back before management became a separate specialty, they used to use this big paradigm. I need to put an apple in a box. How? It's a big apple. So what will I need? I'll need a big box. So we can find comfort in using an adjective. Big box for big apple. How big is the apple? How big is the box? Now that is because the adjectives are not adequately descriptive of exact dimensions. Okay, you have an object. An apple will not be of that dimension. Say you have an object that is 20 centimeters, and you have a box that is 18 centimeters. A is not going to go into B. We have to face that fact. So now, when we have tasks, when we give a realistic time allocation to the task that we need to complete, and go about it single-mindedly. Also, when you have a major task on hand, do not take on anything additional that you cannot handle until you finish the original piece that you have decided to address. So that is another realm of time management that you must face up to, that how much time do I need to allocate to this particular task or this particular part of the task. Get that in order, okay? And that is not something which would tell you that you should quit because you've not done one part in time, or 2 parts out of 7 tasks that you have not been able to do in time. But if you get caught up in negativity, then you will not do the 3rd part in time, you will not do the 4th part in time, and then it will really be a story of something you'll have to give up. Mind you, I know a number of people from this institute who have had to back out of their course because they do not get a sense of priorities right. They do not get proper time they do not get the idea of proper time allocation, and that can spell for the disaster in the long run. This is the time to arrest things, break down your tasks into portions for which you allocate adequate time.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. The next question is to Dr. Ghorpade.
I think the Department of Mechanical Engineering needs to mute themselves.
Department of.
No,
oh, sorry. Yeah. There's some work. There's some work going on near my room. Yeah, sorry about that. There's. Oh, sorry. I guess there's some noise. So.
I think you asked the question. Then mute yourself.
Yeah. So, if one is this is to Dr. Ghorpade. If one is not prepared to travel to another city and join campus, given the troubling circumstances due to the pandemic, how does one cope with the anxiety that is caused, even if it's unbearably extreme? Also, is it not right for one to delay taking such a step of traveling till they feel comfortable or ready about it?
Yeah, I think everybody or most of us are sailing in the same boat as this person is sailing, I would say one. Second thing, nobody knows till how long this COVID problem is going to trouble us. And till then, if it is another 2 years or 3 years, nobody will be ready to wait till then. I think since the institute or the campus has taken enough precaution, and if he follows all the hygienic and preventive measures, probably he can happily come and join and pursue his study. I feel that would be the best.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you for the response. The next question is to Dr. Bide. What is it to be an adult and what is it to be a normal mentally functioning adult? I see a lot of content saying it's fine to have downtime, this and that, etc. And it is so confusing whether I should be working towards a better adult or be satisfied with my current mental state. This confusion just ends up making things worse. So the question is, what does it mean to be a normally mentally functioning adult, normal mental functioning adult?
I don't know why this emphasis on adult all the time.
Yeah.
I always say there should be a little child in you, and you should honor the child in you. The child is an attitude of playfulness, an attitude of general cheer, an attitude of wanting. All these are good aspects of being a child. So let the child in you never stop functioning. But at the same time, yes, it is demanded of us that we show mature behavior, and I guess that is what you mean by an adult. An adult is somebody who has decent control over his emotions, which doesn't mean he never gets angry. It doesn't mean that he never gets fearful, but he recognizes these emotions well and brings them under control in in a reasonable amount of time. And when he, in the course of a slightly disturbed emotional state, the damage he does, he is willing to compensate for it, say sorry for it if anybody has been hurt by it, and then move on. Also, an adult is somebody who faces responsibility in the practical terms, doing the tasks that are allotted to you, tending to relationships and not neglecting them, taking charge of problematic situations and not running away from them. These are all facets of normally functioning adult. I see a lot of content saying it's fine to have downtime. I don't know what, I'm not familiar with this term downtime, but I guess it means fun time. Yes, it's important to have good fun time. It's important to recreate. It's important to have hobbies that recharge you. It is important also to have pastimes. For example, browsing the different channels on the TV is not necessarily a bad thing if you're not doing it all the time. But say 2 or 3 times in a week, you just sit in front of the TV and browse and look for something entertaining that meets your standards of entertainment. IPL slipped out of my mind, but that's precisely it. I'm not generally a cricket fan, but I do watch IPL now that the season is on and Bangalore is doing well. It gives me more motivation to watch the IPL. Now, these are little facets of life that you must accommodate in your life alongside all that adult behavior and responsibility that we already talked about. Now, it's so confusing. Why, I wonder? What I should be working towards? Are we satisfied with my current mental state? I don't know what your current mental state is, sir or madam. If your current mental state is such that you are working towards a PhD or you're working towards your master's and not neglecting the important task at hand for which you are in this institute, then I think you're doing well. If you are neglecting it, please wake up, open your eyes. What is that good movie? It was an excellent movie. Wake Up Sid. I think that's the kind of paradigm I would like to apply over here.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thanks for the response. The next question is to Dr. Ghorpade. I have just moved from an MTech course to a PhD program. I'm finding it very difficult to understand the process because previously the course syllabus were all very organized, were all very well organized. Starting my research at this particular time when I'm not even in a research environment is very difficult for me. I've talked to my guide, but I'm still not able to adjust to this new way. Now no one is there to put deadlines for exams and there is no fixed time to study because there are no classes. I have to manage my own time and study as much as possible. All this stress causes me to procrastinate everything and just do something entirely different. I started PhD because I'm very interested in this field, but the stress has taken all the joy away from it. Kindly advise something.
I would advise in this for this individual in this way, that is the hope that PhD will be very nice, interesting, etc. And from a systematic or a organized course like MTech to PhD is expected. I think if he is not, if it is a shock for him, then that is the cause for this kind of problem. One thing. Second thing, like this person, many people are there in the world today undergoing this kind of a issue. The third and most important point that I flashed in my mind was that of Thomas Alva Edison, who said, when one door closes, the other door opens. So keeping Thomas Alva Edison as a model, probably this person has to self-motivate and live for some time, then everything clears. Probably her problem or his problem also get cleared, I feel.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir. Sir, this is another recent, like later question, but this is directed to Dr. Ajit Pide. So the question is, I have been diagnosed with bipolar affective disorder 2 years back. Currently, I am on medication. Before this diagnosis, my life was like autopilot, but now I keep thinking about my behavior. I do get problems with work and life balance. I sometimes get difficult in comprehending and attention and to sustain concentration. So.
Yeah, so bipolar disorder, I mean, for those who are aware of it, but I'll still repeat it for those who are not aware of it, and a revision for those who know, is a disorder where the mood tends to be extremely carried away in one of two directions. Now, in one direction, which we call the manic direction, we'll call it N, the person is over-energized, full of ideas, very garrulous, very nice to be with. Sometimes these people are very jocular, and their jocularity is infectious. Not only do they laugh, they make others laugh without being clumsy or idiotic. So sometimes that can also happen. They crack jokes, they make word associations that are very funny. They are full of puns and rhymes and things like that. On the other hand, and these people have a sort of a diminished need for sleep. The appetite very commonly goes up. They may act flirtatious. They may get into sexual liaisons without enough discretion. This is the manic side of it. Not, all these symptoms do not have to be there, but a significant number of them will be there. On the other hand, in depression, typically, the person is morose, quite often tearful, sees things in a very negative fashion. The sleep becomes disturbed in a fashion where they wake up very early and they're very miserable in that early waking state. They may go to bed after a few hours and then oversleep and then not be able to attend to their task or class in time. And sometimes when the depression is very severe, they feel they're useless and they also feel that life is not worth it, and suicidal ideas may be engendered in such a mind, and they may even act on those suicidal ideas. This is a very dangerous thing and quite preventable in most instances with the right kind of insight and the right kind of help. So this is a condition which is largely biochemical. It is dependent on the neurochemistry of your brain. Lots of research over the last 50 years has told us that this is a biological illness overwhelmingly. On account of its being a biological illness, the tendency was to believe that the only treatment for it is medication. Medication is tremendously important to bring a sense of balance in this person's disturbed emotional life. When I say it has two extremes of emotion, very rarely those emotions can come at the same time. The M phase and the D phase, the depressed phase and the manic phase, some of the symptoms coagulate and coalesce and come together at the same time. This is called a mixed affective state or mixed mood state. Now, this person needs chemicals, but he needs chemical intervention by way of drugs, but he also needs a supportive system. And having a good family support who understand your tendency to bipolarity and address that bipolarity with enough empathy and sort of hold the reins of your life when you are in a disturbed state. This can go a long way in making life more meaningful. These people need extraneous help to bring discipline into their life and not to do things that are dangerous to themselves, either in the M phase or in the D phase. Very commonly, especially in the M phase, the attention can be impaired, and proper treatment of the manic phase will bring the attention back to normal. Similarly, in the D phase also, though less commonly than the M phase, the attention can be impaired, and with good antidepressant treatment, the attention span and the ability to concentrate on given tasks can also be brought under control. Recent research seems to suggest that certain tasks used by a psychologist to help improve your attention can help you be more focused on the work at hand.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you for the answer. The next question is also to Dr. Bide. How can I overcome my anxiety as a 19-year-old? I'm constantly battling my own mind.
So I'm glad you have the insight to realize that you have an anxiety issue, and that anxiety can be overpowering, and when it becomes overpowering, that's what I think you mean by saying that I'm constantly battling my own mind. Now, the anxiety may be related to specific situations or stimuli, such as exams, such as facing a large audience, such as having to make a presentation before a very strict jury. Now, all these can beget more anxiety. Sometimes the anxiety is without any apparent reason. That is called free-floating anxiety. All the time I'm tense. Dr. Ghorpade mentioned in the context of anxiety a little while ago that there are certain relaxation exercises that can help you cope with your anxiety. Some of us by nature have an anxious temperament. And for an anxious temperament, the practice of meditation techniques, yoga, as Dr. Ghorpade was suggesting, can do wonders. But those take time. It isn't as though you start with yoga and in 3 days you're going to be all right. People who start with meditation or with yoga usually report within 24 to 48 hours that they're feeling marvelous. Why didn't I come to this earlier? But that is a honeymoon phase during which for the first time you're doing something new and you feel good. Unfortunately, that feeling good does not last for a long time, and that becomes a disappointment and people abandon the practice.
Okay.
The important thing about yoga and meditation is that it calls for you should not start it on your own. There are lots of trained people who can guide you, and meditation must never be started by looking at a YouTube as far as possible or a manual and do it. Have somebody initiate you into that particular system of meditation, whether you're doing Vipassana meditation, whether you're doing mindfulness meditation, whether you're doing transcendental meditation, whether you're doing these Isha school have their own form of meditation. Sri Ravi Shankar has his school of meditation, the Sudarshan Kriya method. Now, whatever method it is, let it be imparted to you by a trained, I'll use the word, guru, or somebody trained to impart that kind of meditative practice to you. And do it regularly. The cumulative benefit is tremendous, and it outlasts that honeymoon phase we talked about earlier. If you do not have the time for getting into these practices, and I seriously doubt that you don't have time to address your own serious problem, then there are books that can help you train yourself in certain techniques where a sense of detachment is developed and you look at your life more objectively, and this objective viewing of your life helps you bring in discipline into your life so that anxiety doesn't become such a bugbear through your life. If the anxiety is very severe, it is a good idea to see a mental health professional.
Thank you, sir. The next question is to Dr. Ghorpade. Sir, I am generally an extrovert type. If I feel any pressure or stress, I generally go to the gym visit places. But due to the pandemic, I'm unable to go out now. In the initial first 2 months, I did work out from home, but after that, I am getting bored of doing workout at home. I tried different methods to relieve stress from home, but I am unable to do it. Even now, I am interested to go to gym, but my parents are worried. What should I do now to avoid stress and pressure? Should I go to the gym or not? I personally feel one should be physically fit to become mentally fit.
Yeah. The cause of stress in this person is being an extrovert type, one thing. Yeah. For extrovert people, in the present situation, is really hell. So the stress is going to increase as they start fighting with it. Instead of fighting with it, they should stop fighting with that, one thing. Second thing, now he says he should become physically fit to become mentally fit. I think that is not correct, because both physically and mentally fitness should go hand in hand. not as a separate individual. Third thing would be probably after some time, if he develops patience, I think his problem is going to get solved.
Okay.
I think there are a number of,
Okay,
if I may add, there are
Yeah.
workouts that you can do without going to a gym. In fact, there was when I was a kid, there used to be this Charles Atlas. You used to get these comics at the back. You see a person who is not fit, and the bully who comes along, who's extremely muscular, and he kicks sand in this fellow's eyes, and he gets broken. Charles Atlas developed a system called dynamic tension. So even if you're not actually lifting a weight, you can actually exercise your muscle as though you are lifting a weight by imagining that weight to be there. This dynamic tension, please look up on the net. Dynamic tension was a technique that came in the late 40s and became very popular in the 50s. There are still very few practitioners of this in the US because gyms were not so common at that time, and gyms were expensive at one time even in the US. We unfortunately have forgotten this practice in Charles Atlas's methodology, where you can have a gym within your mind and you can exercise. You can't do everything that a gym does, no doubt about it, but you can do a large number of weight-based exercises even without the actual weights.
Oh, thank you, sir. The next question is for Dr. Bide. I see my grandfather who chants Hare Krishna mantra to be calm and peaceful, which is totally opposite to my state. He urges me to take it up for dealing with my intense stress of deadlines. I tried, but I forget about it amidst all the stress. He reminds me of the meditation whenever I go home. He seems to be really kind and genuinely trying to help me with anxiety. I too felt so wonderful chanting with him as well. Do you think I should take his advice seriously? I think, yeah, you have answered something similar just a few minutes back. Yeah.
That's right. I think chanting mantras can give you a lot of peace, but it needs to be done regularly. And you should perhaps take some time off and be with your grandfather, learn to chant it properly, learn to chant it for an adequate amount of time. Just chanting it 4 times, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna. Oh, my deadline is come. If that is going to be your thought process, because when you are chanting, your mind should be entirely in the chant, not with your deadlines. You want to cope better with life, and I know a number of people who find spiritual succor and relief by being in good spiritual practices. I think I admire your grandfather for having found his particular peace with this mantra. Your mantra might be something different, but if you admire your grandfather, you look up to him, and you like the fact that he's calm, which is what the write-up here seems to suggest, then chant with him for some substantial period of time. I would hazard a guess of at least a week you spend with him and chant with him for that particular week, and also carry your work with you and attend to it while you're doing it. Again, apportioning, rationing time. This much time for the meditation, this much time for the chanting, this much time for my work. If you're a deadline-driven person and not meeting the deadlines most of the time, then again, we go back to my old chapter about good time management.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, sir. The next question is actually is for Ghorpade, sir, but it's a pretty lengthy one. Since we are planning to close the session early today, I'll just go through some short questions which came in later. This is for Dr. Ghorpade. Dear sir, how to deal with anger if we try to suppress it and it just backfires as muscular pain in the chest?
No, please repeat the question. Since it is not there, I am not able to read it.
Okay. How to deal with anger if we try to suppress it and it backfires as muscular pain in the chest?
True, very true. That's why these anger, jealousy, hatred are all considered as a negative emotion. If that can be replaced with love and joy, probably this kind of backfiring will not be there. That's the one point. Second point would be, why does he become angry? That has to be probed into. Then once the root cause is found out, probably the anger may not erupt again. That would be a permanent cure for him, I think so.
Yes, sir. Okay. The next question I would like to pose to Dr. Ajit Bide. I'll try to message you the question also. Can someone get addicted to watching YouTube videos? I have realized that when I'm nervous about something, I end up binge watching YouTube, literally anything that shows up in my recommendations. This in turn makes me even more scared about the upcoming situation. I'm trying to quit this habit. Any suggestions would be useful.
Yes, I think you need a lot of self-discipline, and if you cannot self-discipline, take the help of people close to you. Put your whatever system you're using, whether it's a tab or a smartphone or actually your laptop, wherever you're watching this YouTube, put that system away for 3 days. Do not touch it at all. 3 days of withdrawal is very, very important. No access to your system. Or if you need to do technical work on your tab or laptop, do it on your friend's system if possible. If there's a cooperative friend and if you explain that this is the problem, chances are you'll find somebody who's willing to be supportive. If nobody's available, then you make a sacrifice and for 3 days do not touch it. With all addictions, we have something called a withdrawal phase. During that withdrawal phase, if we yield to the temptation all over again, the chances are that we are not going to be able to get over this addiction. Such addictions include addiction to listening to music, addiction to watching pornography, addiction to reading particular kind of stories, say adventure stories, and seeing horror movies. These are all typical addictions related to the media, and we call them, they are under the broad rubric of behavioral addictions. Just as for addiction to alcohol or addiction to any drug, we usually hospitalize you. The first thing is that there is geographic separation between what is causing you the addiction and the availability of that particular addicting stimulus. That itself reinforces your confidence that you can do without it. So those 3 days without YouTube, I guarantee you will bring down your craving for the YouTube. The first day is going to be hellish. Be prepared for that. Okay. During that time, find something else to engage in, have friends with whom you can chit chat or get into a game of cards. Hopefully you won't get addicted to the card game, or take up something more simple that is considered by many people to be pleasurable, and you say, this is no substitute for my YouTube watching. The trouble with YouTube addiction or video addiction is that you sometimes don't care for what is coming on, but you want to watch. It could be Bharatanatyam, it could be Bollywood dancing, it could be somebody who is a very good mimic, it could be some strategy for how to tidy up your room, it could be something to do with a new recipe. Many of these YouTube addicts will watch anything that comes on. They just want, their eyes and their brain are geared only to that tube. They are now having a tubular vision and they can see nothing on the outside. That is a metaphoric way of looking at it, and it can be handled, it can be brought down, but first geographic separation and total abstention for at least 3 days. After that, with a friend's help, have a rationed time for watching. Maybe half an hour a day if you can afford it, maybe 1 hour a day, maybe a little more after you've managed with 1 hour for about 4 or 5 days, then maybe on the weekends you give yourself an extra hour. But you must have an alarm system, either actual alarm or a metaphorical alarm that tells you, hey, this is the time to stop. Or a system that says that, okay, after this video, I have to stop. And then something inside you will be clawing for more. That has to be curtailed. That devil has to be made to keep quiet. Nishant, I'm sorry, I have to leave now because I have another engagement, as I mentioned to you before. It's
okay,
now
sir.
5:10. If you will excuse me, I'll request my dear friend Ghorpade to continue. Dr. Ghorpade?
Yeah.
May I crave your indulgence?
I would like to leave because of the annual general body meeting will start in some more time.
Okay.
South zone.
Okay.
So in that way, I can spend another 5-10 minutes. That's all, maximum.
Okay, sir. We'll take one more question for Dr. Ghorpade, and
I'll take leave now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Bede. Thank you.
Yeah.
Delighted to be here.
Dr. Ghorpade, we'll take one more question and we can close the session.
Yeah, sure.
The question is how to handle inferiority complex. Online life or online interactions are making it worst. I feel very difficult to speak during online interactions.
See, this inferiority complex, superiority complex, these are all some of the terms that have been used by some research workers. I would say that has got into his mind, and he gauges or judges himself from certain values. That's why he considers as an inferior. But if he really unbiasedly, if he judges him, definitely there will be some amount of good qualities and also bad qualities. That he has to do that exercise, I feel. In that way, he can overcome the inferiority complex easily.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you. Sir, can we close the session then? You'll also be leaving then?
Yeah, yeah, please.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you for the session. Thank you for all the attendees. If you have any more queries, you can answer through the ask through the Google form. It will be active for another half an hour. Yeah.
No,
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Those are the people who are not satisfied with the answer that I have given. Probably they can contact me over my email ID.
Yes, sir. Okay, I'll share the email ID.
Okay.
It's available in the Wellness Center, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Ghorpade.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Anil. Thank you for attending the session. Yeah, we can close now.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for arranging it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.